Good afternoon. My name is Betty Franklin, and I'm representing the Cotton Museum here in Greenville, Texas. And I'm really excited. We have an interview today with Rev Charles Faulkner. He's the pastor of Rising Star Christian Church here in Greenville. And Reverend Faulkner, we want to thank you for agreeing for this interview.
All right.
Okay, like I said, I'm really excited, but I want to know a little bit about your history and your background. And I start out, now tell me, where did you grow up?
All right. I'm originally from a little town called Mount Sterling, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up there as a child and as a student in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I started out as just a young man who had inspiration of moving on to go as high as I can in life.
Mm-hmm.
I finished high school there in Mount Sterling, and when I finished, which was back in 1962, my desire was to go on to college. That fall, I ended up at Jarvis Christian College in Hawkins, Texas. Now, it was quite interesting how I got to Hawkins, Texas. First time I rode on a train.
Mm-hmm.
And that train carried me on into Gladewater, which is about 16 miles from where I needed to go to college, which was Jarvis. So me not knowing where I was going, first time on a train, the train trip was exciting because I wanted to see everything. So I would go back and forth from one side to the other to get to see what was going on. So finally got there. So when I got to Gladewater, didn't know anybody, didn't know how I was going to get to Jarvis.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat there in the train station waiting on somebody to come from Jarvis to pick me up. Well, it waited so long until there was a professor who was on his way to Jarvis. And so he said, well, listen, that's where I go. I'm a professor there, and I'll be more than happy to carry you. So he got all my bags and all and got me to Jarvis.
Uh-huh.
And so I was at Jarvis 4 years, graduated in 1966. When I graduated, I always wanted to be a minister, school teacher, and all of that. And so it ended up that I got a church in Palestine, Texas, during my sophomore year. One of my professors, Dr. Henry, that was his hometown. And so he invited me to come preach one Sunday. And of course, I became what's called a student minister. And I didn't have a car, no way to get back and forth from Hawkins to Palestine. So one of my classmates, Moses York, I can see him now, had a big old car. So every Sunday, he would carry me to Palestine. And so I stayed at that church until I graduated from Jarvis. When I graduated from Jarvis, I continued to pursue getting into education. In fact, I graduated with a double minor, history and religion. But I got a BS degree in elementary education. So I went to during the summer, I went ahead and stayed in Palestine. And a good friend of mine who was a student, not Hawkins, but Greenville, wanted somebody in math. They couldn't find it back in those days, in the 60s and 70s. Math teachers and science teachers, I mean, they were hard to find. And so I brought Ezekiel Talbot here in Greenville to interview for a job. So I was sitting there in the office just waiting on him, and so Mr. Keith Bearden came out, who was over the instructions here in Greenville. said, may I help you? I said, well, I'm here with a friend of mine interviewing for a job. He said, you look like you want a job too. Well, I did want a job, but my goal was to stay in Palestine and get a job there. So I had an interview. And about a couple of weeks, I got a call saying, congratulations, you have been hired as a teacher here in Greenville. And that was at Booker T Elementary, which was a school that was here.
Yes, okay.
I was there my first year teaching, and I stayed there that year. Now, Mr. Hilly Champion was Clyde Champion was the principal. And so I guess it was probably in April, he came out to the portable. I was in the portable and said, Mr. Faulkner, I need to see you after school. Well, you know, your first year teaching and what have I done now? What have I did? So I was nervous until time I got to his office. So went there, and you know how Mr. Champion was. He would rear back in his chair and feel his thumb, look out the window. He said, well, Mr. Faulkner, I've got some good news for you and I got some bad news. Which do you want first? And I get that whole lot. I said, Mr. Champion, I'm gonna let you do it. So he waited a few minutes. So he said, well, Mr. Faulkner, you won't be with me next year. Well, you know why. And he paused, you know, here I am. He said, well, you won't be with me. He says, next year you have been assigned to Crockett Elementary. He says, this is the last year for separate schools. Said, we're going to be integrating, and you have been selected to go to Crockett. So that's where I was for 16 years.
Wow.
Out at Crockett as a 5th grade teacher. And like I said, I stayed there until I decided to move forward. Well, I think my 17th year, they changed the 6th grade to come to middle school. And I was 6th grade teacher. I said 6th grade teacher. And I was qualified to become a principal. Mr. Wesley Martin was the superintendent. And we got along just fine. He called me Parson. And so it was during this time that the streets in this side of town were bad. I mean, they was muddy. So there was a member of my church who one day it rained. I mean, it was so muddy that they couldn't get out of the drive. So I organized the community, and we met at Clark Street several times to get a plan of action to go down to the City Hall to see what we could do to get some paved streets. And so we went down, and I told everybody, I said, all I need is your bodies. Don't have to say nothing, just your bodies. So I addressed the council, let them know what we wanted. So at that time, I think Marilyn Gilstrap was on the board. Trying to think of his name. He was the mayor of the town. And so they all listened and so forth. So no action was taken at that time, but we continued on. So it got to where I said, well, we're going to go a step higher. So I went ahead and called Washington and let them know that we was having problems getting the streets. Now, during that time, they had what is known as community block grants. Now, that money should have been for the blight areas, but it kind of went north. So Washington sent somebody down to investigate. And because of that, the next week, bulldozers, everything was here on this side of town. and we got our streets. Now it cost me a principalship job because I got a principal certification, and I had an interview, but I ended up not getting the job. William Smith got it. Because I had bought the system, and so the news got out. Don't hire Faulkner. He's not who we wanted. So I'm trying to think who the mayor was at the time. What he did, he organized a committee and had me to head that committee so I could deal with the issues that would come along and would come through my committee. And so that's what happened. So in the meanwhile, I was assigned to the middle school. And I says, no, I'm gonna move forward. So I went to Dallas and had an interview and got hired as a 5th grade teacher at Alex Sanger Elementary. Now, I've done already got set up now. School was gonna start that Monday. That Friday I had that interview. So I came back and I told, trying to think who the principal was at the time, Mr. Sibley. He was Charles Sibley. And I said, Mr. Sibley, I says, I have accepted a job in Dallas. And so I never did get to teach in the middle school.
Wow.
So 16 years out there at Crockett was my experience here as a teacher. So I stayed there at this Alex Sanger for about 3 years.
Okay.
And I had been pastoring Clark Street 16 years, the same time. And so I got a call to come to Houston at the University Christian Church to become a pastor. Well, I had, been here 16 years, looked like me, I had reached my peak, and so I accepted that job there in Houston as a teacher.
Okay.
And not as a teacher, but as pastor at the University Christian Church. Well, the church was made up of teachers and principals and all. And so one of the principals got me to a job there in Houston Independent School District. And Ron Page was the superintendent. And so I stayed there for 10 years.
Wow, this is exciting. Yeah.
And in the meanwhile, I married Frankie. And so Frankie's mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So we needed to get back this way. So I got a call from Dr. Jenkins, who was the president of Jarvis Christian College, where I graduated from, and said, Reverend Faulkner, I need a campus minister and a professor of religion with a master's degree, and I can't find anybody. And said, I heard that you have your master's, which I did. I got a master's in Master Divinity while I was there in Houston, at the Houston Graduate School of Theology. And so that brought us back to Greenville.
Okay.
And so we stayed at Hawkins for about 2 years.
Okay.
And then I came back, and so I ended up being a teacher, being a minister. And meanwhile, while I was here in Greenville during those years, I worked at I'm trying to think, was it Nairmore Shoe Shop? Yeah, Mr. Nairmore hired me as a shoe cobbler, and I stayed there for a while until they went out of business.
Okay. I want to touch on several things, but right now I want to go back to your first year. Your first year, you were set
Booker T.
Booker T. Tell me, how was that transition experience from segregated schools to integrated schools?
Well, at that time, like I said, you know, I was at the all-black school, and my first year at Crockett was a new experience, but for me, it was okay because I was accepted. I had no problems with the community, as well as in the classroom. Now I can share one experience. There was a student who was a little difficult in the classroom, and so as we was getting ready to go to lunch, this irate parent busted down to my room. And I didn't get any warning. Of course, I don't think she stopped at the office. But I had the kids to go on to lunch. I had somebody to keep them. So I talked to the parent. I listened. Didn't say a word. I just let her get her steam out. And to make a long story short, everything turned out okay.
That's good.
I mean, she was one of my best parents during that whole year. But it was the matter, you know, I just present myself, you know, I don't get irate. I'm just a positive person. And so as a result of that, I had no problems with the transition.
And that was really good when you said you just listen. And that really helps when you listen, when people pour their hearts out. But let's go to Clark Street Church. You mentioned that because you spoke up in this atmosphere, you were denied a position. Can you give me how you felt about that?
Well, at first I felt that I should have gotten the job. And not only that, but Mr. James Evans, who was one of my co-workers out at Crockett, Mr. Stovall retired. Now, thinking that I would at least, you know, get a job as a principal out there. I didn't get it. James Evans got it. Well, I just, you know, it hurt.
Right.
But I knew to keep my cool and something better would come along, which it did. And I have come through those disappointments, but there's always something better up the road.
That's wonderful. It is.
And I'm 76 years old, and I'm still moving. I retired after putting in 48 years, 48 as a teacher, and I ended up being a counselor, elementary school counselor in Houston, and of that 48 years, I would say about 25 of those years was elementary school counselor.
Oh, okay.
And so I retired as an elementary school counselor at Seagoville Elementary in Dallas. And when I retired, I stayed out a year, and then I started subbing. Now, I was a sub here in Greenville as well as in Dallas. Now, by me being in Dallas for some time, everybody knew me there, and so they called me to come and sub. Now, of course, money was better there, and also I ended up subbing more in Dallas than here. But the good news, this year, I was hired as a full-time sub here in Greenville.
Oh, that is good, yes.
So now this year, I'm in Greenville, and I'm at the high school.
Okay, well, I can just tell you have a love for the job.
So everything's working out good.
You know, you mentioned several people that had this influence in your life. And you also went back and you mentioned the director at the college. Could you tell us more about your relationship with him?
With Dr. Jenkins?
Yes.
It was a good relationship. I was a campus minister as well as a professor of religion. Now, what happened, I was up for the full-time pastor. And at the same time, my desire was to get closer to Greenville. And so instead of me taking on that job after 2 years, I decided to just leave Jarvis and come on back to Greenville. So every transition has been a good one.
Okay.
And so, like I said, Frankie's mother, was diagnosed with that Alzheimer's.
Okay. Okay. And I get excited when I hear you talk about your career because 46 years and you're still going, and that is a blessing. What would you offer to the young people coming up today?
Well, I would offer the young people, even starting in elementary, to start focusing on what you want to be when you grow up. Teacher, doctor, lawyer. Now, being a counselor, I had a unit on career education. So I would have career day and invite the business people and all to come and talk to the kids and so forth. So even in elementary, I impressed on the kids, be somebody in your life. I said, you don't have one life. Don't mess it up. Stay focused. And so as a result of that, there are 3 teachers out at the high school now that I taught when they was at Crockett.
Oh, okay.
One of those is Miss Laura Butler.
I know her.
Laura, who is over the Flaming Flashes. I taught her in the 6th grade. Ralph Sanders was one of my 6th grade students. Mr. Green, I can't think of his first name. He's a math teacher out at the high school.
Oh, okay.
Taught him in the 6th grade. So I have had students who listen. And Miss Butler would tell you today that I'm the reason for her being where she's at now. Because Mr. Faulkner not only taught math, reading, social stuff, he also taught us about life. And that makes you feel good.
Yes, yes.
And I had one student, Farrell Brown.
Yes.
I taught him in the 6th grade. So when he saw me one day, he stopped me in the middle of the street and said, Rev Faulkner, you remember me? And I'm trying to figure, who are you? And so he told who he was. He says, I appreciate you. Said, you really got me where I am now. So I could just name students all over, all that I have felt that I have had an impression on them. So to answer your question, I would say to any student who come in contact with, make something out of your life. I said now, and this is what I would do with kids when I would explain to them about life. I would I have a student come to the board and I have them to draw a character. Once they draw the character, I put a number around their neck. And I said, give me a number. So they would give me a number. I said, now you can take this number and make it positive or negative. I said, now, can anybody tell me you seen somebody with a number around their neck or somebody, oh yeah, somebody in jail going to prison. I said, you're right. I said, but you can take this number and turn it into a positive.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if you stay in school,
Mm-hmm.
get your education, and finish your education, get you a job,
Mm-hmm.
become a productive citizen, that's money in the bank.
That's true.
And I told them, I said, my first year teaching, 1966, my take-home monthly pay was $425. $425. When I retired from Dallas Independent School District as an elementary school counselor, my annual salary was $79,000.
That is good. That is remarkable.
And when I told them that, boy, their little eyes would up.
That is remarkable.
I said, you don't have one life.
Mm-hmm.
Don't mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them heard that.
Yeah.
And they made good, and they come back and tell me.
I see that is so good. I'm hearing. I see the street you mentioned. Was it Wright Street?
Wright Street
Y'all
and
fought,
King
King
Street.
Street. You fought so hard for, and I think that it gave so many other people encouragement because we're still fighting for decent streets in Greenville. I just in my mind I'm thinking about your trip from Kentucky all the way through Texas, doing segregation. What did you have on your mind?
Well, on my mind was to become a productive citizen.
Mm-hmm.
And I was determined that no obstacle would get in my way.
Mm-hmm.
And I always stayed on bending knees and talked to the Lord.
Yes.
And He has been good to me
That is
since
good.
day one.
That is good. I have a couple more questions now
All right.
because
All right.
I want to know a little bit about you mentioned the business, go into business, get a job, but in the 60s and early 70s in here in Greenville, there was an African American business district. I know they used to call it the Flats. While there was black business, there was economy in that area, and we don't see that as much. Could you tell us the business were like down there? Tell us about the business and the overpass that came and just wiped out the African American business?
Well, back then you had very few independent black businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Fitzpatrick was one that survived.
Uh-huh.
Riley Foster service station
Mm-hmm.
survived. Of course, what happened when they started getting the streets and all through in that area, you know, it faded out.
Uh-huh.
Now, right now, I'm gonna be honest with you, I can't think of any other black businesses during that time.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Now, what has happened now, you don't find young people in this community striving to bring about businesses here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do have a realtor,
Mm-hmm.
Miss Rosalind.
Yes.
You know, she's in business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of someone else. And you know, right now, I just can't think of anybody.
And I think that's where we need to encourage our people to focus on business opportunities. And you said something about the Black Block grant earlier, and maybe we could encourage them to look at grants as well. Yeah, to set up business.
Yeah. What we really need is our Afro-American community to come together
Mm-hmm.
like I did back then,
Mm-hmm.
and sit down and talk about what can we do as a race
Mm-hmm.
to better ourselves and the community. right now we don't have that kind of leadership. And I've not got old. I just, when I retired from ministry, I thought it was all over for me. But I ended up here. I was pastor at Center Point Christian Church when it burned and all, and I said, that was it. But here I am, and here still moving along.
And and I love that in your generation. I just want to see how we can push or get behind the younger people of today.
Well, I think the ministerial alliance should get behind the NAACP, and what other organization do we have?
That's mainly it. We have other like cultural diversity and different, but we still need the leadership.
Yeah, we need somebody to get in there and pick up the reins and move forward with it. And it's just a matter of finding that person.
Yes.
Now, like I said, I have paid my dues, and I have just, right now I want to finish my life just enjoying life.
And that's good.
And everybody says, why is you still working? Well, I feel if I sit down now and get the rocking chair syndrome, my days will be numbered. But as long as I have the breath in my life, I know where Frankie is. Perhaps if she was at home and we were doing fine, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. But this is what keeps me alive. I still love kids, and I have a relationship with kids now, as I've always. Now today I'm a carver.
Okay.
And kindergarten. The Lord of mercy, but first day with those kids, I have bonded with them. And I'll be out there 10 days.
Wow, that's great.
And so I said to myself when I went to this, I said, oh no, not kinder, no. And what makes it so bad, not bad, but they are Hispanic kids.
Oh, okay. So you're gonna have to learn Spanish.
Me no Spanish.
You're gonna have to learn Spanish.
But they speak English, and we got along just fine.
Oh, that is lovely. Yeah.
I mean, they didn't even want me to leave. I mean, and then when we're not having school.
Rest of the week, I heard
The rest
today.
of the week. And so they came up and hugged me, I said, I'll see you Monday. Oh, we're going to be back to school Monday, not. But, I just want to just kind of be productive and stay prayed up and keep a positive attitude. And if I can help somebody along the way, that's my job.
This is really, I don't even want to end, but this is really good. Let me ask one more question. I keep saying one more.
Okay.
As a race of people, do you think we're better off today in terms of business and opportunities, or did we thrive emotionally better during segregation?
Well, I think one of our problems is finding leadership. Now, we've got the people, but we need leadership. Somebody get out there and organize and move forward. And we can go.
Yeah.
The harvest is great. Labors are few.
Yes.
And until we get out of that mode, we can move forward.
Yeah.
But we have gotten complacent. We have gotten to where everything's okay, and we know everything is not okay. And if I was who I was back then, we could be moving forward.
Yes.
Because I had this. Our clock was packed. I mean, it was, and the chambers were packed, and that's why I say there's articles in the Herald Banner back then. I mean, I was headlines, and you know, we had that fire out at the church, and all of my articles and things got burned up. So I've been wanting to go back and do research at the well, I do it at the library too. You know, they should have.
Oh yeah, that's
they should have, and you can go there and see if you can find back in the 70s and 80s. Just look up. Just look up my name, and it should be all over the papers.
Now, I'm gonna give you the last word. Now this is the election year, and I know we say we're going through a transition. Can you give me an overview of what you're feeling at this time?
Well, is it my phone? Oh, okay. Right now, it's a little shaky. What's going to tell the story is November 3rd. We can do all the talking, all the preaching, all the shouting, but the bottom line is go vote. Now, once the voting is over, then we can see where we are. Right now, nobody knows. But there's a record number of turnout already. But where is the buck going to stop? Who knows? So on that note, wait and see.
Okay.
As we say, wait and see the salvation of the Lord.
Yes.
He's still in charge.
Yes.
And that's where we are.
We want to thank you very much for taking this time for the interview.
Okay. I got my undergrad at Jarvis. I took advantage of evening classes and summer at East Texas State University back then. So I ended up at East Texas State getting a master's in sociology, getting a certification to be a guidance counselor. I also received my superintendent certification and I got a principal called mid-management at East Texas State. Then when I ended up in Houston, I went ahead and went to Houston Graduate School of Theology and ended up with a Master's of Divinity. Also, I have certification for adult basic education. Now, I did teach adult education here in Greenville at the Austin Elementary School.
Okay.
And you had people like Virginia Price. She was one of my students. And she graduated, you know, she was a cashier at, Safeway?
Safeway, yes.
Safeway. And also, the lady that worked at, what was her name? She was the cashier for Greenville.
City of Greenville.
And she had a son who was a minister. He's in prison now. Oh, what was her name? She was one of my students. She was from Paris. But anyway. So, so I didn't waste any time. I mean, every day counted. And when I taught school, I knew I wasn't going to stay in the classroom all my life as a teacher. And I went ahead and got my certification as a counselor. So back in Houston, I was teaching, and it was in the wintertime out in the portable. I didn't have time that evening to put my work on the board for the next day. So I came to school that morning and turned my back on the board. So something hit me back in my head. And I said, I had enough. It was in the ghetto in Houston. I packed up my bag, put on my coat, and left that class. and went to the library. So the principal came in and said, Miss Faulkner, what's good? I said, I can't think of the principal name, but I said, ma'am, I'm out of here. I says, I've had enough. She says, no. I said, Miss Faulkner, I'm going to put you in a special ed class. And she did. I stayed in that class. There were about 5 kids. And first, didn't have no idea to be teaching special ed. But that special ed class led me to where I ended up being a counselor. They had a freeze on counselors during that time, but they opened it up. So I went and applied. And that summer, Frank and I went on vacation. Came back, the phone was just flooded with calls. Same person. Miss Faulkner, you need to call the office, the Houston. And I couldn't hardly wait. We got back about midnight. So I went ahead and called. And I can't think her name now, but anyway, she said, congratulations, Mr. Faulkner. We've been trying to get you. She said, you've been hired as a counselor. And that's all I needed. So I came back and I told the principal, I says, I'm just going to let you know I got hired as a counselor. And the principal says, Mr. Faulkner, I don't hold anybody back. If they get a position higher, say, hey, good for you. So through all of that, just because that crazy class, I ended up being a
Wow.
And so I was prepared for it. So I can tell you a whole story.
That's so encouraging.
Let me see, mailing address, P.O. Box 1730.
Someone had told me about the struggle they had. I think Miss Gilstrap, Dr. Gilstrap, the struggle they had getting Wright Street paved, and I knew Clark Street and Rev Faulkner was involved in that. That's why I touched on that. He was involved in that.
I didn't know what street it was exactly.
It was a big deal.
It was Wright Street and then I think King Street. But Wright Street, I'm trying to think who it was. I had took pictures and all. I had that before the council, and he was trying to get out of his drive that morning to go to work and got stuck in his driveway. Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, and I think Charles Sibley, Mr. Sibley, told me the story as well.
Yeah. Okay.
We really, really.